Okay, starting soon. Okay, Bicol University, College of Industrial Technology, Electrical Technology Department, online video lectures with Jay-R Ballon. School year, first semester, school year 2020-2021. So our subject for today is Computer Application 1. Introduction to Computers is our topic. Okay, so good morning. Welcome to my online video class. And today I'm going to share to you a PC building simulation that I'm going to use for this subject. So this is a type of gamification wherein yung games ay ginagawang educational, and since we cannot do physical or actual or practical means of doing this kasi we cannot do face to face because of the ongoing pandemic with COVID-19, I opt to use this um, PC building simulation so that we can use this as an alternative method. So let's begin. Okay, so this is PC building simulator, and we're going to do a how to build a PC. Okay. Okay, so how to build a PC. In this tutorial, you will learn about the main components of a PC and how they go together. So just like in a real situation, we're going to actually open the case and then install components for the computer. So first, we need to remove the side panel. Okay. So yan yung side panel. Then the other side. Okay, so install the PSU or the power supply unit. So it's located actually at the back for this case. In other case or chassis, it's somewhere at the top. So here, we're just going to remove first the case for the PSU mount. Yep. So I have a sequence in removing screws so that it won't tilt or uh, misalign. No. Okay. So here we have a power supply. Ito yung power supply. So modular ports. These ports allows you to attach cables that carry power to the components. So modular means that you only have to attach the cable to the components you have. So for example, you only have a hard drive, one motherboard, one graphics card. So yung needed na cables lang ang pwede mong i-connect. Unlike sa non-modular power supply, all of the cables are available, which some of them are not being used. Medyo messy lang siya, no? Pag nakita mo yung case, pag open mo yung case, may mga unused cables lying around. So it's actually eating the space inside the computer and restricting yung airflow, no? Yung airflow. So we have a fan for the power supply so that it can cool down the components kasi nag-heat up siya eh. And of course, the main power supply port going to the AC. By the way, ito yung modular port. So you only have to select a cable that will be connected to the motherboard. So let's install the power supply, which is located at the back. Ayan, nailagay na yung power supply, then install the mount. Okay, so first we're going to do the outer screws. Again, we have a sequence. 1, 2, 3, 4. So ayan naman, 1, 2, 3, 4. So why am I doing that? So that it won't disalign or tilt the power supply. And also to protect the screw thread. So now we're going to install the motherboard. So at the heart of the personal computer or PC is the motherboard, and all the major components are connected to it. So let's go back. So here's the motherboard. Yan. So we have I/O ports or input-output ports where you plug your uh, peripherals like your keyboard and mouse. So yan po, may mga ports yan, no? USB. Then we have the PCI slot. So the PCI slots are very high speed connection to the motherboard or for PCI cards. And commonly the most connected card here is the graphics card. Before Wi-Fi, kailangan pa siya naka-connect sa slot, but some motherboards nowadays they are integrated and some graphics card are also integrated to a CPU. But of course, if you want to get the best quality because you're actually getting high speed graphics processing, you have to include a graphics card. Mamaya we will add a graphics card. So standoffs, by the way, yung standoffs na yan, that's where you put the mount screws to the case or the chassis. Then we have front panel headers. So this is where you attach all the ports and buttons on your case. So that includes the power button, the reset button, and some USB that is found in the front of a computer. Then we have HDD or SATA ports. This is for your hard drive. This connects the hard drive port to the hard drive itself. Then we have the CMOS battery. The CMOS battery is used by the motherboard to remember its settings when it has no power. So for example, even when there is no power supply connected to it, the internal clock or the BIOS that keeps the motherboard information is stored in the CMOS battery. So pag natanggal yung battery, what will happen there is yung date and time niya dyan marireset and mostly of the information inside the motherboard will be set to default. So sometimes yung basic hardware troubleshooting sa motherboard is simply by resetting the CMOS battery. But anyway, next is chipset. So the chipsets are the processor that support the CPU and manage how it works. Every CPU model has its own bespoke chipset that is designed to get the most from it. So it really depends on the motherboard. If it is Intel, it has a special type of chipset. If it is AMD, ganun din. So actually we have to discuss like North Bridge and South Bridge on the next lesson for motherboards. Going through the next is we have CPU socket. So this is where you put your CPU. So meron siyang shield, meron siyang lever so that you can lock in place yung CPU. Then next to it is RAM or random access memory slots or simply known as memory slots. So they are the slots where you put the system memory or RAM. And in this case, meron siyang apat, but mostly sabi dito we have like 2 or 8. So 2 for a small board or known as micro ATX or mini, and 8 usually are server computers or motherboards, and they have more than 4. So in this case, we are using 4 only. And lastly, for the parts of the motherboard is the power supply connection. So this is the motherboard power supply where you're going to connect it from the power supply to the motherboard. And that is like 24 pins. And sometimes depends on the motherboard. Okay. So, excuse. We're going now to install the motherboard. And first, we're going to add the screw heads or standoffs. So, yan. Nalagay natin. Walang sequence yan. Just putting in the standoffs. Okay, so the motherboard is in place. This time, we're going to use a sequence. So, top. Then, dito. Dito. Then, top. Here. And here. So, I'm doing the sequence so that it won't tilt or magkaroon ng gaps or disalign. Okay, so we're gonna put in now the cable for the power supply. It's a 24-pin ATX power. This is the one that's going to supply the entire motherboard. So connect it to the power supply. Yan. Then next is the one at the top. It's an 8-pin ATX CPU power. This supplies the power for the CPU. Then front panel. So like I said, your front panel is connected to the power button and the ports dito sa case. Yan. So we have USB ports, reset button, etc. Okay, so we're going to install the CPU. So the central processing unit CPU is the PC brain. It performs calculation based on the information from some components and passes the result to others. Okay, so let's go back to the box. Ito po yung CPU. Meron siyang heat plate, the processor itself, and the pins located at the bottom. So yan. So this looks like an Intel make or brand CPU. And as you can see, meron siyang parang uh, triangle. No? This is actually where you put the correct alignment doon sa motherboard. So heat plate, ito yung meaning niyan. The CPU has a heat plate that is attached directly to the processor. So this is designed to quickly get the CPU's heat away from the CPU cooler. And the processor itself or the die is the chip that does all the calculations in the computer. It is very delicate and is tightly packed so it gets hot quickly. Then the pins that plug into the socket on the motherboard. So each CPU model has its own pin layout and orientation in the socket. So it really depends, like AMD and Intel. Yung dalawa lang naman yan na nasa market. Okay, so here we're going to zoom in. And then we're going first to open the CPU shield, yung lever, then yung case, yung shield, then we put now the CPU. Actually, gently put it in. In this case, this is a simulation, no? And close the shield and lock in place. So now we're going to apply the thermal paste because without the paste, it will not actually directly connect the two metals. So kailangan natin ng paste. So the CPU gets very hot and it needs to be cooled by a cooler. So first, before we put the cooler, we apply a thermal paste. So this will improve the conductivity between it and the cooler. So let's go back to the box. But first, we're going to apply yan. So parang ipot lang. But anyway, you have to spread it there because it should cover the metal part or the heat plate of the CPU. Okay, so eto na yung CPU cooler. So this is a CPU cooler. We have the fan, we have a bracket, cooler plate, and the heatsink fan. Then yung power pupunta sa motherboard. So yung fan blows the air away from the heatsink. The bracket is now attached to the motherboard. So this is the heatsink. It has like fins. Usually it's aluminum kasi it will absorb heat faster. And pag nahanginan or na cool ng fan, it will be dissipating heat much faster. Yung cooler plate is at the bottom. That is in connection with the heat plate doon sa CPU. Sige, install natin. So this is where we're going to put the CPU cooler. And as you can see, meron siyang parang direction of the wind. So in this case, ang orientation ko ay ganyan. So the fan will blow here, then papunta dyan sa labas. Okay? Okay. So yun. Yan. Then we put the CPU fan to the motherboard. Yan. Okay, so install the graphics card. The next important component is the graphics processing unit. So GPUs are often mini computers in themselves with their own processors and memory to calculate the complex visual of today's games. So yung mga power-hungry specification of computer, they really need a good graphics card. Okay, so it's a graphics card. And as you can see, meron siyang graphics processor similar to a motherboard with the CPU. Ito, parang maliit siyang motherboard na meron siyang CPU, which is the graphics processor. So at the heart of the GPU is the graphics processor, and it turns instruction from the CPU into something you can see on the screen. So kung gaano ka detail yung isang game or graphics, ito yung dahilan. and kung gaano ka fast yung frames per second, yung details and cleanliness ng graphics, siya po yung dahilan. Okay, meron siyang heatsink and fan, just the same with the CPU, and this will go to the PCI connector doon sa motherboard. Backplate will support it connected to the case, and dual GPU if in case you need more graphics card, pwede siyang nakaparallel para madagdagan yung graphics processing unit. So let's install it. First, we're going to remove the cover part or PCI cover. Okay, pag natanggal yun, let's put in the card. Okay, so as you can see sa likod, meron na siyang port for the HDMI going to the monitor. All we need to do is lock it in place. Okay, so the next hardware we're going to install is the memory. So RAM or random access memory is a very fast memory that the CPU uses to hold the programs that are running on the PC. So RAM comes in sticks, and many of the same type can be combined to give the PC more memory to use. Okay, let's go ahead and get the RAM. Ayan yung RAM, memory chips, connector, and locks. So yung lock, it will be locked in the motherboard. As for the connector, meron siyang parang bungi or notch in English. So RAM connects to the motherboard with a special connector. So each type of RAM has a special notch para hindi ka mamali sa paglagay. Anyway, may guide yan eh. Okay. So memory chips, sa loob nitong heat spreader or heatsink ng RAM, meron siyang mga memory chips. So the chips on a stick of RAM are very fast types of memory designed to hold programs so the computer can access them as quickly as possible. So usually the higher the capacity and the speed is the better, but of course, yung budget natin dyan, yung ang medyo masakit. Anyway, let's install this. Siyempre, the better the performance, the price will be higher. Yan. So we have to unlock first the locks here. Then we can now put the memory. Ang pag-push niyan is from side to side. So that it will sit in place. Ito naman. Yun. So automatically pag ni-push mo yan, magla-lock yung locks. Just make sure that you have the right orientation. Okay, so the last major component is the hard disk drive, or known as HDD. The hard drive stores all the data for the operating system like Windows or Apple, yung Macintosh. So in our case, we're more commonly aware of the Microsoft Windows, Windows 10, Windows 7, etc. So the programs and applications dyan nakastore sa hard drive, yung photos, music, videos, etc. Okay. Okay, ito yung hard drive. We have a spinning disk and a SATA power connection. Ito yung para sa motherboard, yung SATA, and then yung power, yung para sa power supply. So spinning disk means hard drive has a disk inside that spins. So similar to a DVD. But in this case, kaya siya tinawag na hard drive because the disk inside is hard. Ano siya, metallic, no? That stores the data. So the faster the disk spins, the faster the data can be accessed. So in this case, 15,000 RPM or 15,000 revolution per minute ang pag-ikot niya para mag-store or save ng data. So sa hard drive, sabi dito, some servers drive spins over, ayan, over pa dyan sa 15,000. Okay, so here in the case, we are going to install the hard drive. Meron siyang hard drive bay. So we're going to install. Ayan, then we're going to push it back. Then we're going to connect the cable. So at the back, you will see this one will be for the power, yung malapad. It will be now connected to the power supply. So yung modular, yung benefit nito is you can only select which port, but make sure that the right port is connected to the component or else masisira yan. But anyway, there is a guide for that. Okay, so yung SATA is connected to the motherboard. Kahit saan dito will do, but sometimes meron yung naka-assign na numbers wherein it will be the first to be selected. Pero sa BIOS or the basic input and output system motherboard, you can actually configure kung saan siya una mag-detect. Okay, so almost done. We're going to connect additional cooling. So in this case, we're going to add fan. Isa lang siya kaya fan. So yung fins, meron siyang actually meron siyang direction kung saan papunta yung airflow and a motor. So usually the faster the motor spins, the fan is better. O yan. So sa likod ulit, yun yung sequence X para hindi siya mag-tilt or misalign. And lastly, yung power supply sa motherboard. Okay, so yan, nabuo na natin yung computer. All you have to do is arrange the cables here. In this case, this is a simulation, walang ganon. We'll just have to close the case. Okay, so we're asked to connect the cables. Ito, keyboard, doon sa USB port. Mouse sa USB port. HDMI for the monitor dito sa graphics card. And the power cable to the power supply unit. And now we're going to turn it on. So that ends our PC building simulation. Okay. So salamat sa pag-antabay. Salamat sa panonood. That's the gamification mode of learning. And with the help of PC building simulator, at least it will bridge our problem with the laboratory part. For this case, hanggang dito lang muna tayo because of the ongoing pandemic. Anyway, thanks for watching and I hope you learned something. For the next topics, we're going to use the same simulator kasi yung career mode niya meron siyang actually mga actual simulation like may virus, kailangan mag-reformat. Although hindi siya nakalagay sa Windows, but at least it will represent how it should be. Then meron dyan yung pag-upgrade or pag-install ng other components. And we can actually do a custom build PC. Yung dream PC natin, pwede natin gawin dyan sa free build. So, I want you to know na ito yung magagamit natin for now. Then, if you have dream build sa PC na kailangan yung gawin, we can actually do that here sa PC building simulator. So, again, thanks for watching guys. Class. And that ends for the topic 1, Introduction to Computer. So thanks for watching. See you on the next topic.